Well, since this is a gaming YouTube channel, that means I'm obliged to review some retro games. Problem is though, I'm not that old. I didn't grow up playing with an NES, or Super Nintendo for that matter. Heck, my first console was the GameCube, which was released well past the quote-unquote retro era. Although there is one retro game I do want to discuss. It's a game I picked up during a trip to Japan when I was 15. It's a little known game called Akumajo Dracula, although internationally it is known as Super Castlevania 4.
I'm sure everyone and their dog knows about the Castlevania series by now. A classic trilogy of games on the Nintendo Entertainment System, but probably best known for Symphony of the Night on the PS1. And of course, these games were developed by Konami, back when the name was synonymous with awesome games. We're talking Contra, Silent Hill, fucking Metal Gear Solid. However, today the name is synonymous with... yeah, let's not talk about that. My personal history with the Castlevania series is very limited. Prior to playing Castlevania 4, I only played the 3 games released on the DS. Dawn of Sorrow was pretty good, Portrait of Ruin was fantastic, and Order of Ecclesia was... a game. I'm sure nobody will dispute that. Now as for Super Castlevania 4, after watching James Rolfe's Castlevania retrospect and highly praising it, I knew I had to get my hands on this game. And during a trip to Japan, I picked up a Super Famicom and a copy of the game.
Of course, what I'm holding here is the Japanese release of Super Castlevania 4 for the Super Famicom. But for the sake of convenience, I played the international release on my Super NES Mini. As far as I know, the difference between the two versions are negligible. I noticed that Simon Belmont's whip makes a different noise, that and the language differences, but aside from that, they're basically the same game. Look at this thing, it's so tiny. All you have to do is stack 2 Super Nintendo cartridges, and this thing has 21 games in it. I mean, how do they manage to fit all that game into this small thing? Oh, shit.
It begins with one of the best introductions to a game ever. Every time I watch this, it sends chills down my spine, immediately putting me in the mood to play something truly haunting.
Now all you need to know in terms of backstory is that Dracula's back and Simon Belmont is off to kill him. Along the way, he destroys any and all monsters that were spawned by Dracula's evil. Doesn't get any more simpler than that.
And simple is a good word to describe this game. All you have to do is reach the end of the stage, fight a boss, and move on to the next. It's classic side-scrolling action at its finest. The biggest innovation is being able to whip in 8 different directions, giving the player more control over Simon Belmont's actions. It's extremely handy being able to whip in different directions in order to get out of a tight spot. And believe me, you're gonna need this ability, because this game is harder than a slab of granite. You will die, and die, and die, and die. However, the beginning of the game isn't all that tough, and I was able to breeze through it relatively unscathed. And the bosses don't present that much of a challenge either, just need to stand there and wail on them until they die. But once you get to stage 4, that's when the game really starts to kick your ass. It's as if the game was saying, alright, you've had your fun, but now it's time to get serious. And from here on out, the game ramps up the difficulty to a whole new level. The boss of this stage is much more difficult than the ones previously encountered. If you stand there and try to wail on him, you're gonna get yourself killed. Gotta figure out the pattern. Whip the rocks falling from above, then smash that fucker in the face. And after all that, it leads to this part where you have to dangle from your whip in an impressive display of Mode 7. And then there's this part where the whole room is twisting, followed by a room with ascending platforms. Gotta avoid the ceiling spikes. Then it ends with another boss fight, this clay golem guy. And if you game over here, you go all the way back to stage 4-1. Gotta get the cross here. Now he's much easier. Yeah, Take that, you stupid fucking dirt pile. Your mom's a grain of sand. Thankfully, Stage 5 is nice and short, and it acts more as a prelude to Stage 6 and beyond, where the real meat of the game lies, because from here on out, you're in Dracula's castle. And as an affectionate nod to the original Castlevania, the first hallway of Dracula's castle closely resembles the first stage of the original game. Pretty neat. But once you go upstairs, that's when you realize that this game is a whole different beast entirely. Jumping between these massive chandeliers is a real bitch. Just gotta get the timing right. Ah, fuck! And these ghosts, fuck them to hell. They never stop following you. Just, get away from me! Stage 7 is a library and plays this nice relaxing tune. I like it. Helps me unwind a bit after the headache caused by this game. Except you can't relax when everything in this game is trying to kill you!
Now Stage 8? Oh man, Stage 8. I mean, this game's pretty fucking hard. All the classic Castlevania games are, but Stage 8? I was both dreading and looking forward to playing this part, because in my opinion, Stage 8 is the hardest section of the game.
After beating the night boss in Stage 7, the ground beneath Simon Belmont crumbles away, leading them down into the depths of the castle. A dungeon filled with spiders, fire-breathing skulls, floating eyeballs, and worst of all, spike traps. They're everywhere, and if you touch them, and I mean so much as graze against them, you're dead. Oh come on, you can't even touch the sides of the spikes either? That's cruel. Oh, and by the way, hey Game Grumps, wanna know an easier way to get past this part? Just duck and walk. Easy. However, the boss of this stage is rather easy. Yeah, it's the Frankenstein monster, but once you get his pattern, you can pretty much beat him without getting hit. Thank the game designers for showing some leniency. Alright, on to Stage 9. We're about 2/3 into the game now. I guess we're supposed to be in Dracula's treasure hoard. Probably looted from all those Ottomans he impaled after the night attack of Tergovishte of 1462. I mean, Vlad Tepes was the inspiration for Dracula in the Bram Stoker novel, and the novel's canon is also the game's canon, so I like to think they're all the same Dracula. The boss of this stage is just a bat made from gold coins and jewels. I really do not get how this fight works because when you hit it, coins fly off and sometimes they hurt you and sometimes they don't. What the hell? It's just another one of those bosses where you gotta wail on them and hoping they die first before you do. But now it's on to the last two stages of the game, which for some reason are labeled Stage A and Stage B. They're not too difficult, but the best part about these stages are the music, as they use glorious 16-bit renditions of the classic Castlevania themes. But then there's this part where there are falling staircases and a buzzsaw that follows you up. First time I saw it, it scared the shit out of me. And of course, there's this section with the elevating platforms. You gotta keep jumping to the ones below, or else you get impaled onto the ceiling spikes. Ah, ass! And if you die here, it's all the way back down to the falling staircases. Cut me a break. Once you finally get through, you're in the home stretch. And let me tell you, there's no fucking around anymore. What you're given here is a gauntlet of 3 boss fights in a row. First is this wingless pterodactyl named Slogra, who keeps jumping every time you hit him. And you can't stand still or else he lands on top of you. You gotta get the pattern right. First, hit him whilst crouching, then take a few steps away, and then swing at him again. Once he loses his halberd, you gotta hit him immediately when he lands on the ground, or else he'll stab you with his beak. You just gotta touch him real quick and go. 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 Ah, fuck! Next up is this flying gargoyle named Gaibon. It's interesting how Gaibon and Slorgo would become recurring enemies in the Castlevania games. They were one of the earliest boss fights in Symphony of the Night, and by the time they got to Dawn of Sorrow, they got demoted to just regular enemies. I guess Dracula was pissed when they couldn't stop Simon Belmont or Alucard. And now it's time for my most anticipated boss fight, the fight I was dreading the most for this entire playthrough. It's time to fight Death. First, he goes mental, flying all around and tossing sickles. Then he does this suction move where you're drawn towards the right hand side of the screen and you have to dodge his scythe. And he's so fucking quick, you'd wish Simon Belmont could move faster. But judging by the size of his thighs, I'd say he trains more for strength rather than cardio.
You know, Death is a boss character in nearly every Castlevania game. Never really understood that. Why does Death, the Grim Reaper, take orders from Dracula, considering that Dracula was simply a mortal man who turned into a vampire, whereas the Grim Reaper is the embodiment of death itself? He's eternal, a godlike figure who reaps the souls of mortals. If anything, Dracula should kneel before Death, not the other way around.
And at long last, we finally reach the end of the game. Now, of course, I have to mention the secret invisible platform where you can stock up on hearts, get the cross, and both Roman numerals. And trust me, you're gonna need all of them. When you enter the room, purple lightning starts to flicker. Then down comes a pillar of light, and there he is. It's Dracula. He's so nonchalant in this fight, just teleporting around and shooting fireballs at you. It seems like spamming the cross and jangling the whip around is the best strategy, but it's not reliable enough. Then, Dracula will start spawning these flames and you have to hit them before they get too close or else they'll keep following you. Ah, damn it! When you get Dracula down to 4 or 5 pegs of health, the screen starts to flash red and Dracula transforms. It's actually kind of underwhelming. Hey, remember what he transformed into in the first game? That was awesome, and it actually made the fight a lot harder. But here, Dracula doesn't look all that different. He just kinda looks pissed off more than anything. All you gotta do is stand in between the lightning and keep throwing crosses. Dracula is dead, and the morning sun vanquishes him. Or, I don't know, maybe it's the light of God shining down on him. Simon Belmont watches from a distance as Dracula's castle crumbles to dust. And then the credits roll, showing you snippets of gameplay, reminding you of all the trials and tribulations you faced in this game. It's in these moments where you look back and reflect. All the pitfalls and boss fights, the numerous game overs and moments of frustration, but in the end, you realize you've just completed one of the best games ever. A triumph which I will remember for the rest of my life.
In case you didn't realize, I love this game. Even though I didn't grow up with a Super Nintendo, the joy of being born a generation after is that you have a chance to discover and appreciate these games as relics from the past. And this is a relic I highly recommend. It's challenging, but it pisses you off just enough to the point where you want to reach the next stage. You want to beat the next boss. And with Infinite Continues, there's no excuse to quit playing. So, yeah. Buy this game. Get a Super Nintendo in the cartridge, or get a Super NES Mini. Get it on Virtual Console. Whatever is most convenient for you. You owe it to yourself to play Super Castlevania 4.
Then it cuts to the present day, and then finally we get to see a familiar face.
We were here in Russian territory to back up a U.S. counterintelligence operation. A simple support mission.
Wait. Hold on a second. How do they end up here and wherever they are? Last we saw them, they were driving off into the sunset with a truck full of gold in the Caucasus. Did the U.S. Army just drop all charges of desertion and insubordination? Aren't they still technically AWOL? How did they get reinstated? What happened?
The game doesn't explain anything, nor does it reference anything from the previous game, except for this one corkboard in the background. So, I guess all events in the first game just didn't happen.